Hi, everyone. Welcome to Maximizing Online Learning, brought to you by LawTutors. My name is Tanya Shaw. In addition to being the owner of LawTutors, I'm also a professor at Western State Law School, now part of Westcliff University in Southern California in Irvine. And I have with me Brittany Raposa, who is a professor at Roger Williams University in Rhode Island. So we are purposely coming to you from coast to coast, as far apart as possible as we can get, just to represent all of you. So what we wanted to talk about today is maximizing online learning as a law student. And Brittany and I both have a lot of experience, not just sort of navigating the online learning experience, the academic success experience, but also, dealing one-on-one with students who are dealing with this right now. We're constantly in conversations with them, we teach them. And so we wanted to sort of bring to you a lot of the concerns that they're having and talk about them from our experience, but not just our experience, a lot of our studies, our research, what we found. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and begin talking about maximizing online learning. All right, so first what I'll do is I'll just let you know some of our upcoming free webinars. We have some great webinars coming up. So today's obviously about maximizing online learning, which is for any years, in law school, whether you're first year, second year, third year, fourth, 4L. We have, if you're an MPRE taker, we have a free MPR webinar tips and tricks coming up, and that's to really kind of go over, even though you've taken professional responsibility, it's really different how they teach that or they test that on the MPRE. And I was just talking about it with some students of mine. And so we want to sort of take you out of that, well, I know my professional responsibility class, so I should be fine. Take you out of that mindset and really demonstrate to you how they teach this on how the NCBE tests this for the MPRE. On the 17th of October, we have how to outline effectively. We think that that's really the time that if you have not started outlining yet, then we want to make sure that we give you that little push on outlining. But we also don't want to make you feel like, okay, I don't know what this outlining is. Does it have to look like one thing? Are there different ways to do it? So that's what we're going to hold for you on the 17th. And then on the 7th, of course, the thing that matters the absolute most is how to write a law school exam. We want to ensure that your first time seeing a law school exam is not on exam day. That is going to be very crucial. Some students are better at, getting in there and practicing hypos and stuff than other students. And we just want to make it that all students are doing that. And we'll really emphasize how crucial that is in this webinar for you. All right, and just to talk a little bit about the agenda, we've done our welcome. We're the new online law experience, because it is new. Tips for successful online learning in law school, as it is quite different than, of course, the in-person. The importance of communication in basically in the online world when in law school, self-care and managing mental health. I'm sure you've heard of Zoom burnout, and that is a thing. And it can really sort of get to you. At first, people are like, "Whoa, I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to wear pants." And then all you want to do is put on pants and go, see people. So we're going to talk about that. And then, of course, we're going to have some questions and answers. So I'm going to start with Brittany, and I'm going to have her talk a little bit about our new normal.
Yeah, so I think that if you're watching this or you're here today, it's likely because you are experiencing law school online, whether there's a couple of different experiences that you might be having or could still be having within the spring semester. If you're not having it now, unfortunately, we're in this unknown area of the world where we don't really know where we're going to be in the spring semester. So it could also look like this, or maybe even a little bit different. So You might be a student who's completely remote, meaning that you only attend law school online. You could have a hybrid or blending a learning approach, meaning you have some portions of law school online and some in person, whether that's one class online and another class in person, or some of your classes online and some of that same class is in person. You might be experiencing now lectures are not live, so you're no longer sitting in that stadium seating of law school with your professor lecturing in person and live, but instead the lectures are pre-recorded. And so today we're actually going to talk about how to deal with that a little bit. And then you might then have online classes that are live in real time. So they're at the same period and time period that your class would normally be, but now it's just online rather than in a classroom. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Brittany.
I was just going to talk a little bit about blended learning and what it is, and try to get some positive spins, because I think that law students everywhere, and rightfully so, are upset that their legal education has shifted, right? That you're no longer in person. Now you're learning online and you don't like it as much, or you think it might not be as effective, but there actually are some positive spins and attributes to online learning that I want to make sure that we discuss, so that way you know that you can really benefit from some of the positives of online learning, especially if you were kind of feeling down about it. So what all law schools are incorporating right now, no matter if you're in person or online, they're all pretty much incorporating this blended learning. And so this is like it's not a new concept, but it's definitely a new concept in the law school world, where you combine online content with in-person content or in-person teaching. So you're learning in part online and in part in person. And so in addition to that online class experience, which is typically a lecture that may be recorded, you are also having a face-to-face component for interaction. So what it typically looks like, and what it's looking like at my law school, is a professor would lecture, and their lecture would be completely online. And then there's an in-face person experience and class experience where they do practice problems or have a question and answer session, so they can apply what the students learned in that online lecture. So that's likely, this blended learning environment is likely the experience that a lot of you are facing right now. And likely, there's a high likelihood you would be facing the same type of environment in the spring.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I do want to talk a little bit about the benefits of it, because I think that there's a lot of, and rightfully so, right? A lot of disappointment or frustration with this online component. But there honestly are benefits that, if you know these benefits and try to take control of them, then you're taking control of and making positive of the situation that you're in to just maximize your success in law school. So one of the things that it does is it provides you with autonomy and control over your learning, which sometimes we don't really have in the in-person law school experience. We go to class and then we might not have any idea what happened in that entire 1 hour and 15 minutes. Like, I wrote down some notes, but I really have like no idea. And then it's the next class and the next class. So you kind of have autonomy over your learning, because you can spend some more time with the content when it's online. When a lecture is pre-recorded, you can pause it, go back to it, or pause it and try to understand what was just going on before you move on to the next concept the professor talks about in that same lecture. So it gives you this control over your learning that you don't have in a fast-paced classroom experience, which sometimes those fast-paced experiences, law students get lost, and then they didn't really figure out how to do that until second semester or later. So that control over your learning, I think, is really, really important. And it gives you an ownership over your learning that you might not have had before. You might have been doing law school very passively, just attending class and like doing whatever and then taking a test. But having this online component really forces you to take control over your learning and be very active about it, which is only going to help you understand the material more and in the long term, because this material, remember, never goes away. It's tested on the bar exam in how many ever years time. that you're in. And then it also will be prevalent in practice. It also, I think, so a lot of students assume that it doesn't allow you for much engagement. You barely see your professor, you're online. But actually, it will likely allow you to engage with the material more. So instead of being in a classroom and being overpowered by many voices of other students in the classroom and only having a limited time to talk to your professor, whether it was right after class or in a quick office hour, your professors are likely having more time available for one-on-one students when they already had pre-recorded their lecture. So it gives you more opportunity to engage with your professor, not only about questions of the material, but maybe you'll say, hey, you know what, I watched your lecture and I did this practice problem, and I want you to tell me if I'm in the right direction now. So it will allow you to engage more with the material, and in turn, then because you've had more time to engage with the material, you have a bigger opportunity to engage with your professors.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I wanted to add, thanks, Brittany, to the benefits is that nobody has a back seat. Okay. So gone are the times where it's like that person who's really tall is sitting in front of you, so you can't see the board, or you're the person in the back and you've got your glasses that day, or the professor wrote something on the board too quickly and erased it, you couldn't hear. So everyone has a front row seat. And that is actually a big deal, because now teaching in person versus teaching online, I certainly see that difference, and it does force engagement more, because there are all of those students who will always be sitting in the back, and you can't do that anymore. So it absolutely forces you, because you have a front row seat whether you like it or not. So that's actually a really good benefit for you, particularly in law school.
Yeah, and I also think something similar to that, actually, that I didn't think of until just this moment, because you kind of made me think of it. But a lot of us are like, I know I was in law school. I never raised my hand. I was very shy. I didn't feel comfortable talking. But I think online learning gives you opportunity for different platforms to participate. So like, I would likely feel more comfortable typing in a chat, right? So if your professor teaches on Zoom, you can now contribute in a chat. Or your professor is likely opening up other online communications, such as like forums. Well, you can then participate there. So it gives you a better chance and probably a more comfort, I think. And anyway, I think that to participate if you didn't have that before.
Yeah, absolutely. And so next, what we're going to talk about with you is, now that we're telling you about the benefits of online classes, what are tips to prepare for class, to prepare for this online learning? So how do we prepare for our classes online? So we're going to talk a little bit about the fact that online classes are no different than in-person classes. You have to have the same discipline, the same time management, the same organization. The study space is going to be particularly important in these situations. Participation, taking notes, and asking questions are all going to be crucial. And I think in particular, also gauge how your professor goes through the materials. Like, are you always going to have to be like referring to your Twen or to your Westlaw, your Lexis? Do they expect you to have it printed out and written on? I've seen professors do both, where it's like, okay, this is on Twen, have your Twen open, have this open, or, what do your notes on this case say, things like that. So you also want to sort of gauge how your professor expects you to not only engage in class, but sort of how they expect you to reference your materials.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things to keep in mind is that, like, if you don't treat it like an in-person class, then it won't feel like a real class. And then your motivation likely will decrease, and then your effort will decrease, and then your grade ultimately, as a flow, right, then decreases. So if you're not in that mindset that it's a real class, you really have to try to get yourself into that mindset, because you're still earning a grade as if it was a real law school class. You're still responsible for the same material and assignments as if it was an in-person class. So if you don't get into that mindset, then your grades will likely suffer. And just remember that grades grades aren't the most important thing in the world, but they can help you get things like internships, scholarships. There's a really strong correlation with grades and bar pass. So you want to put that effort in because it's not just a short-term goal. There's a lot of long-term goals grades contribute to. And so treating it like an in-person class and like normal and just kind of, it's just a different medium, right? So having that mindset is much, much better. So one of the things too is just remembering the different components that go into preparing for an in-person class is essentially the same as it would be with an online class. So you want to do the readings before you watch the lecture or attend a live lecture online. So whether that's briefing cases or doing any similar class readings, you want to take notes on those readings. Then, and we're going to have a webinar on this, right? So you're going to want to outline. You're still going to want to do that. There's still an exam at the end of the semester. So you're going to want to synthesize rules and synthesize cases from everything that you've been learning, your readings and your in-class experience. And then our final webinar is on this last piece, right? You want to practice problems. You want to be able to practice writing an exam before taking the exam. The exam still has the same amount of stakes. Just because you had an online class as opposed to an in-person class, the exam's not going to change. So all of these components still need to remain the same. The one thing that I think could change slightly in your benefit is if you do have pre-recorded lectures, I think that you definitely want to do the reading beforehand, but you don't necessarily have to bang your head against a wall to try to understand it because the lecture is going to help you do that. So you might find that almost like your pre-work for class, your time could likely decrease if you have pre-recorded lectures because you could do the reading, but you don't have to stand there or sit there and say, oh my God, I really have to know this reading before class because I'm afraid I might get called on. And you spend hours upon hours with 3 cases. Now you can read them and then your understanding can get cleared up in a pre-recorded class or an online lecture. So what it could do, and which is a benefit perhaps, is shorten the time that you prepare for class. So that way what happens in class, which is arguably very important, and what can happen after class, it gives you more time to do that.
Yeah, it's to absolutely go right off of what Brittany was saying. I love this quote from one of our successful students, which was, I spent so much time preparing and reading for class and trying to understand. And then I would get to class and that's when I would actually learn what I needed to know. And then all that time beforehand, while some of it, of course, you have to prepare, so much of that time, like Brittany was saying, banging your head against the wall and being like, oh my God, what does this mean? Is actually going to be cleared up in class and oftentimes post class. And so, and one other thing I want to note about these different components, so that we're not just sort of out of touch professors telling you what to do. Well, Brittany's definitely not out of touch at all. I might be a little bit. Is that we did a study of like 150 of our most successful law students to find out, after that first semester, what worked and what didn't. So this is not just us pulling it out and being like, this is what we did, it's really about what students did and didn't do and what worked for them and what didn't work for them. So this is really that, and I wish somebody had told me this when I was in law school, to be honest. And so I do want to emphasize the fact that the preparation is important, but the fact that you don't understand it right then and there should not be where a significant amount of your time goes, which does not mean that you don't have to understand it, but it is a process.
Yeah, and I like Tony. So I am a 2015 graduate of law school, so a little bit recent, right? And I would literally spend hours and hours with my real property cases and nothing. Honestly, those 5 hours, it made no difference from when I first started from when I ended, because I was like, what does this even mean? It was in class where I was like, oh, okay, like that makes sense. So what happens in class, and most importantly, what happens after class when you sit with the material, when you digest it, when you synthesize it, that helps more than what happens before class, because class gave you finally context and explanation, and then post class gives you understanding and time to understand it. So a lot of students spend their time or say like, I don't understand how I'm supposed to have time to do everything you're telling me to do because I have to like prepare for class and blah, blah, blah. You still do, but your time can definitely increase. And that this online learning environment definitely allows you to do that. Spend more time with your now one-on-one learning, which typically happens after class, after you got some understanding from class.
Absolutely. All right, the importance of self-testing. I don't think this could be emphasized enough, and we seriously could possibly do a webinar all devoted to this, but we're not going to. So we're just going to really emphasize here how important that the self-testing is in the learning process, and in particular because you're online now. So Brittany's going to talk a little bit about what you should be doing.
Yeah, so self-testing, and I'll just say this, self-testing is so crucial no matter if you were in person or online, right? But there is a heightened element of importance to it when you are online because of that feeling that you all have or likely have, or what I hear students have, as if, oh my God, I feel kind of isolated, like it's online. I don't really have other people to talk to. I don't know if I'm understanding this like I think I am. Self-testing allows you to get those questions answered for yourself and allows you finally to say, wow, I understand it or I don't. So what should you do in order to self-test to see if you're getting the material or grasping it, especially in this new online learning environment? So I think that you could do a couple of things. And so you're likely going to finish covering a couple of topics or a topic at the end of every couple of weeks, or maybe at the end of every week. So you want to do a practice problem at the end of a unit or the end of a topic to see if you understand it. So if you're in contracts and you just finished learning what an offer was, right? This is like a really good example. You just learned what an offer was. And so at the end of the week, you say, okay, I got this definition of an offer. And in class, we talked about the difference between an offer and something called a preliminary negotiation. I really need to see if I understand this. So at the end of the week, you could do a practice hypothetical on an offer. And if you get it right and you analyze it, then you can say, okay, I'm definitely understanding this. You had no idea what the practice problem was talking about. It signals to you that you might need to amend something in your online learning. Maybe you're going through your lectures too fast. Maybe you're not asking enough questions. Maybe you're not engaging with the material enough. So I think that it allows you to kind of self-assess how you're learning constantly throughout the semester. So you're not waiting until the end of the semester and saying, wow, I never understood what an offer was, and now it's 3 days before the test and I need to. And like, or you're getting to the end of the semester and think, wow, I think I was doing online learning completely wrong, and now my exam's next week. So you want to avoid doing that. And so I think you should try to do that practice problem, like understand what an offer is without your notes first. Just see if you can spot the issue, see if you can come up with it, because that's going to help to see if you're taking things in from class and if you're approaching online classes in the correct way. And then if you get it, then look up your notes and find that issue, find the definition of offer, find the rule for an offer, see if and ask a couple of questions to yourself. Do I understand this concept? And am I able to apply this concept to a set of facts? If so, then you're pretty good on that topic. And you'll probably do some more practice problems on it later. But self-testing is so important always, but definitely in online learning, to make sure that you're doing online learning in the way that best works for you and the most effective way for you. Because if you find yourself saying like, wow, I don't understand anything, or I don't even know what an offer is off the top of my head and it was 2 weeks ago, it likely means that you're not engaging with your material enough, and you need to kind of reinvent a schedule for yourself or reinvent an approach to these online classes.
Yeah, and one other thing I'm going to add, sort of just an additional step to, once you've done it without your notes and after you've looked up your notes to find the issue and the rule, another step that would be good is to then making sure that you redo that practice problem with the correct rule as well, and not just passively be like, okay, that's what an offer is. I didn't actually put that right, but now I know. Physically write it in. physically write in that correct rule after you've practiced it and you might have gotten some things wrong, because that again will allow you to not only actively engage with the material, but that is what the process of application is, right? You want to now use the correct rule if you didn't have it correct, and apply the correct rule as if you would be doing it on an exam. So it should be sort of this process where you're like, okay, I'm going to do without my notes. Now I'm going to look up the rule, just like Brittany had said, to see if you understand it and to see if you can apply, as Brittany has written here and as she's talked, to the concept to the set of facts. But remember, not just looking at it and being like, okay, now I know. Now let's use the correct rule in doing so. All right. So
go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, you go ahead.
And this is just honestly because like I can't, like, actually, let's just be honest, right? And I think Tanya might agree. Like, most law students don't do this. They don't self-test.
Yeah, no way.
They don't make time for it. And so like I just want to make sure we're stressing the importance of it here, because you can hear it, but actually, and thinking, wow, I probably should, but doing it is another step, and incorporating it into your schedule is another step, which we'll talk about in a little bit when we talk about how to structure a schedule for online learning. But it's so helpful because it helps you commit stuff to long-term memory. It helps you practice analysis, and it's essentially helping you prepare for an exam. And you need to check in with yourself about online learning or your hybrid learning environment. Are you retaining the information online? Are you passively attending class online? And if you are, what can you do to actively attend class online? Are you understanding the material that's presented to you? What questions do you have to ask your professor about your understanding? What do you need to do differently? This will all help you become a better learner, and in turn, a better exam taker. You'll do better on exams. It will just help you. So everyone watching this, please, please, please self-test. It could be stressful fitting it into your schedule, but it will ultimately produce a better final exam grade.
Yes, I could not agree more. Not more at all.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people or a lot of students say, like, how can I do that then? Like, my professor doesn't give me practice problems, or like, what can I do? But you likely have access through online study aids through your library. I know a lot of law schools do this. I know that my library at Roger Williams has a lot of online study aids available to its students. Maybe your professor does give you practice exams, past exams, or hypotheticals. There's always hypotheticals in your case books after a particular unit. You could do those. You could also contact your academic success department at your law school to see if they have any practice problems that you could use. So there's a lot of ways to self-test. And so the answer is, I don't have any questions, because you do. You just have to get them.
Absolutely. And, you know, it was one of the things that I sort of realized a long time ago when I had started this company, was that, you know, students do need to be doing practice problems along the way. And, you know, that's why we sort of created this little mini essays book, because understandably, if you have just gotten through the first couple of weeks of torts and have just learned battery, sometimes it's difficult to do an entire exam. So you do want to be finding targeted problems that will help self-test you, where you can actually do an IRAC or a CREAC or a CRAC, or however your school has you particularly write, that are targeted to the issues that you have learned.
Definitely. This is a nice segue, I think, into our next kind of tips, which are, and it's kind of what I'm hearing a lot of, like, I'm overwhelmed. That's a very popular phrase. Well, just generally in 2020, but particularly with law school, I'm overwhelmed. I stay up until midnight. I don't know how I can possibly do everything I need to do. So we're going to talk about some tips for creating an effective course schedule during this time, particularly with online learning, and likely stressing the importance of creating a very detailed schedule. We just happen to be with someone who creates color-coded and very detailed schedules on a daily basis. So we it's so, so important for your success in law school.
I do want to say, however, though, is that Brittany doesn't just hear that from her students. She does hear it from me too. And then she's like, did you put it in your schedule? Did you put it in your schedule? Because I'll be like, like you could have a beautiful online color-coded schedule, but if you're not actually, like sometimes I'll be like, it's so beautiful, and then I'll put it away. And I'll be like, Brittany, I don't have time for this. She's like, well, is it in your schedule, number one? And number two, are you doing it? So that's another thing, you know, and it's almost like this concept of creating the beautiful outline and not doing anything with it. So, you know, I am great at color-coded schedules, but also equally as important is implementing them. All right, Brittany's great talk. This is a great segue into Brittany talking about structure.
Yeah, so, and honestly, it's something that I had to juggle recently, being in this online environment, right? It's kind of difficult. And I think that a lot of you probably feel that way. You're teaching online. I mean, you're taking classes online, you're studying all of the time, and now your home space is actually your school space. So it's like naturally you wake up and you go to your school space, or naturally for me, I was feeling I wake up and I just go to work, because like now work is home and home is work, and it's very muddled. And then I thought, well, now I also have more to do, right? And I think all of you are feeling that way. So like I had more to do in terms of now we're online. So I have to prepare for classes to be online. So I've got this like new role. I have to make more engagement for my students. So I've got to build that into my schedule. So I have to do more office hours or more like sessions with my students to engage them and so forth. I have a unique situation, and so does Tanya, in which the bar exam blew up this year. So then the bar exam continued for a longer period of time, giving us more to do. And so I think that you're all feeling the same, because now you have online classes to watch, and likely you're getting more practice problems from your professors or some other type of assignments to engage you more, since you're not in person. And then you might be taking longer to watch lectures, because now you can pause and you're realizing like, oh, wow, an hour and 15-minute lecture is turning into a 2-hour lecture. So sometimes one of the downsides I think of this online environment is that sometimes it gives us more, and it can be a little bit more overwhelming. We got a lot of FaceTime here on the computer. We're Zoom fatigued. And so structure is so important. Especially because regular law school creates that structure for yourself. You know, you have to be at school at 8 a.m. because you've got class at 8:30. And you know you need to go to the library in between because your next class is until 2 p.m. So you've got library time. Now you're just like home. And there's a TV, there's a fridge. I visit the fridge frequently. There's a dog, there's like a lot of stuff. There's parents, there's an election year. Like there's a lot happening. So easy to become, like I can't stress that enough. So it's easy.
There's 2020, which is just in and of itself enough.
Yeah, so it's a lot. And so you need to mimic the structure that normal life would have created for you, essentially. So you don't have time to go, you don't have that normal in between period to go to the library. Well, then you need to create that structure in what you would have done at a library. And you would normally wake up at 8, so you should still wake up at 8. You need to create that structure for yourself in order to be successful. And so you don't feel so fluid with your whole day, and then you end up losing your day. And so you need to create a schedule. And I personally am a little weird, so I think you should schedule it out hour by hour. Like I live based on something that looks like this, which is a planner. It's a written planner. I've got like, I write things in it, and I plan, and it goes hour by hour. And you could do that on an online calendar. I mean, any way that you want to. So you want to create a schedule anytime you're going to read for class, practice questions, doing an assignment that's due for class, maybe a legal writing assignment that you have. And this includes like breaks. When am I going to eat lunch? When am I going to exercise? When am I going to go for a walk? When am I going to, I don't know, take a break? And so I kind of made this sample schedule, and this is just very sample, like, and it's based on a hypothetical student. But say they wake up at 7, they do their morning routine for an hour, they answer emails then for a half hour, Then for an hour, they're going to read for torts. Then they have a large criminal law reading, so they're going to allocate an hour and a half. Then they take a lunch break, and after lunch, it's their online torts class. And then they have online legal writing. Then they have an online assignment that they have to do for class before their next criminal law class. So 2:30, that's when they scheduled it, and it's only 5 questions, so only about a half hour. Then they're going to take a break. Then at 3:30, they're going to say, okay, I had torts today and I had legal writing, so I'm just going to synthesize what I learned today. I'm going to sit with it, schedule an at-home workout and a dinner break, and then at night, I'm going to just do some studying or some more practice problems.
This is oh, go ahead, Brittany.
Oh, no, go ahead. I said this is just an example. Like, you don't have to do this, but.
This is a great example. And also, think about it this way. You schedule it out, but you're also collecting data for yourself, because let's say you do schedule this out, the crim law didn't take you as long as you thought it would. However, doing multiple choice questions actually took you a long time, or your workout ran a little long, which never is a problem for me because my workout usually runs not at all. And things like that. So it's a great way to collect data as well, because you start doing it, and even though it's forward looking, it can also be backward looking. And my students, and if you watching this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I force them to do a calendar for the following week. It seems like at first they're like, hi, we're adults. But what I do is I have them do it, not just so I can be like, what is it that you're doing? I want to know your whole life and creep on what their life is like. It's so that I can then the following week be like, so can you guys tell me about what was accurate, what was not accurate, things like that, especially in law school if you're embarking on a new way to study and a new way to learn. So it's not just important to schedule it out forward looking, then you can look back at the data and be like, yeah, that wasn't working, or this took a lot shorter, or this took a lot longer. Right?
Definitely.
So my students out there, you're loving me for it, right? Right. You will one day.
Definitely. And then you probably want to build in a buffer here, like a buffer in terms of like, if you think you're going to pause and take notes for the lecture a little bit, then give yourself a little bit of a buffer, more time than just an hour and 15 minutes if it's an hour and 15-minute lecture. And you want to schedule everything, right? Networking events that are online or virtual this year, or anything like that. And including your weekend time, right? Everything I think can be and should be scheduled. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, one more thing. I just want to also say, my sisters make fun of me because they're like, isn't it not normal to try to schedule everything, because things happen, and I completely understand. We are living, 2020 happened and nobody expected that, right? So all of the 2020 calendar is almost an extra way. So that is understandable. So just understand that, like, you want to put this plan in place so that you have the structure. But when things do come up, and they do, that are not in our control, you want to figure out what we can do with that schedule to amend it as well. How do we get this stuff in? And that's why buffers are important, some time in the beginning, some time in the end, so that when unexpected things come up, you can also learn how to plan for that as well. So planning is not just making sure that you plan out every hour of your day, which is an amazing exercise. Planning also means planning for the unexpected and saying, okay, how do I work with my schedule to plan around the unexpected when it happens?
Yeah, exactly. And if you haven't been doing this, like, again, I think we're just stressing a lot of things today, but stressing how
stress. not bad stress, good stressing.
Good stress. Yeah, you have to do it soon. So, like, remember to try to set times up for everything. And this is just a couple of examples. Attending class or watching lectures, reading for class, synthesizing notes, outlining, doing practice problems, taking practice exams. So it's just really, really important. And if you schedule all of it really specifically, and throughout each week. Like if you say every Sunday I'm going to make my schedule for the week and you want to incorporate all of these different things, you can also probably get a head start on outlining, head start on practice problems, right? Because you've had already scheduled it in. So really, really important to try to get this schedule in place very soon.
I'm just going to add one more thing that I thought of, because students unexpectedly can get sick, things can come up, but as professors, things come up as well. And I know I was really, fortunate to sort of, when something had come up for me, to have a trusted colleague who could take over my class, or trusted people around me who could do certain things. So remember, it also is a good idea to have certain people in place in your life, whether it be family members or students and things like that, fellow students, your fellow classmates, that if you get sick or if you do this, that you have a support system, or somebody can take notes for you or get you the notes, or, that your family understands, like, hey, can somebody bring me over food because I don't have time to cook and stuff like that. So in creating this plan for yourself, it is also a good idea to implement and utilize the people around you for times that you do need help.
Yeah, definitely. The support system is definitely something that's fantastic, and that you want to gather, whether it's fellow students, or whether, it's someone even that you establish a relationship within the administration or a professor. Any support system, I think, is going to be critical.
Yeah.
Also critical is having a space, right? Because now we're all at home. Or not at home. I don't know. I'm always at home, but I'm always at home.
At home.
Yeah. And so now we're going to talk about creating an effective study space. So it's important to get a space. And I understand that not everyone has the same privileges as everyone else in order to get this space. And so you might live with a lot of people and you don't have a quiet or space that you can call your own, and I completely understand that. And so you just want to try to craft it in the best way that you can. So if there is a spot in a corner where you can put a desk or a table and a chair, and that's the place that you do your studying, then that's it. Or if it's in your bedroom, because that's the only place you have to go, if it's in the corner or a certain space within your bedroom, then that's going to be it. You just want a space that you're always learning continuously in, if you can, and it has everything you need: your books, your papers, your pens, a dictionary, note cards, anything, Wi-Fi, obviously, and try to separate that space from your personal space so you can establish like still a home and then a workspace. And then I just want to say too, and I recognize that other people have privileges over others: steady Wi-Fi, a secure space, a consistent space. Just make sure that you communicate, I think, with your law school if you are having difficulties finding that space, having reliable Wi-Fi. Your law school can likely help you with that and help you maybe secure a space at the school, even if most people aren't in it. So just make sure your level of communication is open, so you can study and maximize your success with Wi-Fi, minimal distractions, in a place that can be familiar and continuous for you.
Yeah, I agree completely. A couple of things that can help you. For example, behind me, I had just gotten some just a divider from like Amazon. And they don't have to be expensive at all, and you can even just put that maybe next to your desk or something like that. Even if you're in a small room and it's not, it's not, the rest of your space is also small, that can be one way to do it. And I do know that many law schools, and you can always check in with your law school librarian like that, do have spaces for students. I just went and visited the law school that I teach at a couple days ago, and the library, there were study rooms set up where students could study individually, and there were libraries and even faculty offices. I'm not at my office at the law school, so I'm like, a student can use my office. And so check in with your law school if you are in close proximity where it makes sense to be there. What do they have to accommodate you? Because you would be surprised that there are ways to accommodate you.
Yeah, definitely. And so make sure it's that importance of communication, I think, that we will still talk about, that makes that critical.
Right.
And so you also want to, so like that, we talked a little bit about having a safe space and having like minimal distractions there, but you also want to avoid online distractions. So it was even tempting when we were in person, right? When you're in class and you're on your laptop taking notes, I'm just going to go to Messenger, or I'm going to go buy those shoes on Amazon I've been thinking about. And I'm guilty of doing it.
I'm guilty.
And it
I'm
was
guilty of doing it now. Yeah.
It was always shopping or Pinterest. Like that's my thing. Like I get like, oh, like internet, like it's so open. So in order to like maximize your success, you want to avoid the online ones. And so I just provided some sources here, but there are a ton. If you Googled this issue, you would see a lot of things come up, right? So like there's an app or a program called Self-Control that you can download. It will deliberately block out, distracting websites that you put in, and it will block it out for a certain period of time you want it blocked. Concentrate also does something similar. And there's a link here to some more sites that do it. But honestly, if you Googled like minimize online distractions, so many resources will come up. And a lot of my students are using them and are like thanking everything for them, because if not, they'd likely be even more distracted than they already feel, especially with everything going on in the world. All news is always popping up. There's a lot of political stuff always popping up. There's a pandemic stuff popping up, and you could easily get distracted by online stuff. So you just want to make sure that you are investing in yourself and avoiding any distractions as possible. And I think that includes online distractions too.
Yeah, and I think the importance of utilizing apps out there that will block things are particularly important, because I do want to make a note about self-control, because believe it or not, in this day and age, it's not just about your self-control, because there's an interesting, I'm not telling you to go watch this because this is a distraction, but there is a series called The Social Dilemma on Netflix, and it's about all these past CEOs of Google and everything, but the power of artificial intelligence, not just to throw things in your face that are like, oh, this is interesting, but to pull you, that to collect information on you and pull you in different directions. Don't discount that, because even you'll see people who've created this artificial intelligence will be like, I am tricked by it and I created it. So don't just be like, okay, well, I'll just not pay attention, because, and I know it sounds interesting or almost strange, these distractions are actually created to distract us a lot of times. So to have a way to block them out is even more important, and not just a matter of I won't pay attention. Because if that artificial intelligence can trick the person who created the artificial intelligence, it can trick any of us.
Exactly. So another thing regarding kind of just this virtual world and setting up your study space, you can also set up virtual study groups. And I think that now that a lot of us are online, and then even a lot of our time is online, and it's hard to have a study group in person because you have to stay 6 feet apart and wear masks when you talk to each other. It can be very difficult to even carry on any study group in person. So virtual study groups can be very beneficial, whether they're on Zoom, Google Hangouts, FaceTime, anything. Because if you can check in with your classmates on whether they're understanding the material, whether they're where they're at, you can bounce ideas off of them. But in the alternative, it just gives you some of that social connection, being with people who are going through what you're going through, and really kind of talking to people who are similarly situated as you, and going through it, I think is really beneficial, especially in this time where we're isolated a bit more and we're just online. So I just want to stress that even if you aren't a study group person, during this time, I think it can be very beneficial to just increase your social connection and your communication with your students. And remember that a lot of connections that you make in the legal profession start at law school, and they start with the people you go to school with. So even though we're not in person as much and can't do a lot of activities in person, virtual study groups can help you build those connections, whether it's for future networking, just friends, camaraderie, and just kind of for your own mental health, I think.
Yeah, and this is absolutely true. And sometimes professors actually test out this theory. I test it out in class all the time with breakout rooms, and it sort of and Brittany's actually correct that sure, your personality might normally not lend you to a study group, or it might crave a study group. This is all about sort of different types of personality types. However, in particular with the online atmosphere, that sort of collaboration is important, so you're not just sort of sucked into your own world where you're not getting that kind of interaction that you would have after class, before class. Hey, did you do the reading? What did you think? Stuff like that. You want to go to the library together. So I know one of the things that I utilize in my class are breakout rooms for activities. And I like to talk to them. I think, how is the breakout room? And of course, there's going to be some that are quieter and some who will take over and stuff like that. But the process of interacting with your fellow colleagues is really important in this learning process, because that is also what law school was designed for, was for us to collaborate too.
Exactly. So that's a nice segue into communication and how important, again, it's one of those principles where it's always important. Like communication is always a good skill and always important, but it even becomes more critical in an online environment. And I'll kind of talk about the importance of communication between you and your school, or you and your professor, or the administration. So I can speak for myself in terms of when I'm teaching in person, and I love all of my students, especially, well, my past ones who I had in person, love you always. But I can always tell when they're just like not getting it, right? Because I get a lot of blank stares, or I get a lot of like, what is she talking about type of faces, or I get a lot of like, I have no idea what she's talking, like she could be whatever. And so I don't have that anymore, because I can see people, right? I can see people on their little screens in Zoom, but often, right, I can't see all of them because I've got a PowerPoint shared, or I've got like something else up. So it's so important that you communicate with your professors, whether you understand something or whether they don't, whether they're going too fast and you need them to slow down, whether something's just not clicking. Because normally we can read the room and we can read it pretty well in terms of this stuff. But now, in order to invest it again, like I feel like a theme of this webinar is investing in yourself and your own success. So you have to advocate for yourself and communicate on your own behalf, right? And so in order to do that, you have to communicate with your professors and telling them if they need to spend more time on something, or they're going too fast, or you have any questions about what's going on, you really need to communicate that with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is particularly important. Brittany had brought up that, she was a little bit more shy in law school. So maybe the way of communicating for you isn't necessarily, raising your hand and speaking and all that sort of stuff, but there are multiple different ways. You can shoot them an email, shoot them a chat, ask them after class, and things like that. So shyness should not get in the way of communication in some form. It's just not it's not conducive in certain ways, but it is in others, and it certainly didn't stop Brittany from being valedictorian. Sorry, I just had to throw that out there. Didn't stop Brittany from being valedictorian of her law school for being shy, because she found very effective ways to communicate.
Right, definitely. And there's a lot of ways to communicate. There always was, but now we kind of have this like reliance and emphasis on online, so it becomes a little easier. So your professors might hold virtual office hours. I mean, I know I do 3 times a week. So you could pop into their virtual office hours, you could email them. If they have a live class, you can linger on Zoom after class. And I know a lot of professors do that. I like linger in case, so I can mimic the experience of people coming up to me after class,
Mhm.
that same type of thing. Um, you want to talk to, if you're really having trouble in a class and keeping up with the online, talk to your dean of students or a similar person who deals with student affairs, or anyone in your administration who can help you do that. Fellow students. If you're a 1L right now, don't hesitate to try to like communicate with an alum, right? Because we all went to emergency online instruction last semester in the spring. So some of your alum already have, or not alum, sorry, but maybe some of your upperclassmen already have experience with this. Or someone who had just recently graduated has experience with this online learning environment. So I don't think you should hesitate to reach out to your alumni office or someone at your school and say, is there an alum I can talk to? Or is there an upperclassman I can maybe run some ideas by? And you likely can find that help through your student bar association or some other type of organization on campus. So attend a virtual meeting, make friends or make connections with some upperclassmen, because that can help you navigate some of this stuff too and help with communication.
Yeah, and a lot of law schools, and hopefully yours too, has this concept of either dean's fellows or upper class tutors and things like that, and understand, and they'll have like a little tutoring center where you can drop in, and we don't have that so much anymore, right? Where you can't. However, do you might even know of this resource, or if you haven't taken advantage of it, or you might not, do see if there are upperclassmen who have would have otherwise, been tutoring or in a tutoring center or something like that, because they're an amazing source. And I have to tell you, even for me, they're an amazing source as a professor, because they have just gone through this. So while a student might ask me certain questions about how to handle maybe a certain professor or handle a certain situation, my dean's fellows who, and we actually have appointed dean's fellows, are fantastic for those answers, where I'd be like, well, the way I handle the professor is very differently because I'm a faculty member. But a student might have a very, very good look at how to do certain things. So I think that make sure that you check with your dean of students, to see, hey, are there these upperclassmen if you don't already know, and if you do know about them, definitely utilize them.
Definitely. And so we're kind of closing out the webinar with an important topic that likely often goes set aside, which is self-care and wellness. I mean, so do as I say, not as I do. I'm working on this portion, right? I think we all need to figure it out. Tanya, maybe you too.
Yeah, I need to figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like something you figure out, but you need to make time for, especially in law school, and especially during, and we've said it so many times, this 2020 is taxing, right? This year has been taxing for so many different reasons, mentally, physically, emotionally. And so we have to make that time. And so you just want to make sure you're building in time into your schedule to manage stress and take care of your mental health. So take breaks, meditate, yoga, go for walks, read books, like pleasure reading books, not like your law books. I read more romantic comedies often when I just want to I just want to read something else. Watch a movie, start a new series. I just started one and now I can't remember the name, so this is embarrassing. Bloodline. I just started Bloodline.
Oh,
Okay, it's pretty good.
I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard.
Maybe get into a new series. Make sure, if it's really upsetting you, try to limit the amount of news intake you have or anything that might be triggering to you. Play games, like try to spend time with family or friends if you can during the pandemic, maybe FaceTime, whatever. It's really, really important if you're having trouble with anxiety, or if you're feeling depressed in law school and you feel really overwhelmed, don't hesitate to reach out to your school's counseling center if your school has one, or some other professional that I think you could talk to. Because law school is not easy by any means, and it's very stressful. And then now we have a lot more outside pressures and stressors, I feel like, than ever before. So don't hesitate to reach the counseling center or an individual personal counselor it could definitely be a good idea during this time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree. I do. I like to, I've actually seen Brittany's postings of all her books, so I've been writing them down because are the ones that she likes to read. So I've seen those. And so I'm like, I'm going to check some of these out.
As you
So
should.
I know.
As you should.
I should.
They're good. And so just some final things to remember regarding this topic, right? It's absolutely okay to be upset and pissed off. Like if you're pissed off, about something in the country or in law school, it's valid. But try to think positive, be organized and be productive. Try to think of this as like you have goals to meet. You want to be successful this year. And try to focus on those goals. Be disciplined in order to achieve those goals. If you need to remind yourself of your goals, write them down and like put them on the wall near you or have them open. I do that. I start every day with a goal list and like not a to-do list. So there's a difference. So a to-do list I make is always unattainable and inachievable. But a goal list I'll hit. So it's like that is very helpful to keep you motivated and know that like this too shall pass and you will definitely get through it. You just have to try to be positive and take care of yourself and you will get through it.
Absolutely. And to just add on to this, some of the best sort of like success coaches and mind coaches and growth minds coaches, to go off of that sort of think positive thing, it's about how we take a situation and formulate our thoughts, right? So I might take one situation that is exactly the same, and you might take another situation, but we can make it what it is. We can make it our own and decide how we want to think about it, right? So we can look at COVID, for example, very differently. One person can be like, this is the end of the world, this is horrible, whatever. And perhaps another thought process is, this is terrible. It's brought a lot of us together. It's forced us to think about, how do we handle situations like this in the future? How do we become, unified? So the thought that you put to a situation is yours. So therefore, you can make that situation whatever it is you want it to be, right? Having a lot of reading, this is horrible, I read slow, whatever, versus, okay, I have a lot of reading, I need to make sure I understand how to read efficiently. And that's great because it's going to teach me how to read like a lawyer. Even though I'm not a speed reader, I can learn how to read efficiently. So it is really important that everybody is going through the same situation. The thought that you associate with that situation, that is in your control. The situation is not in your control, but your thoughts about the situation and then subsequently your actions about the situation are within your control. Woo! Definitely. Never gotten that philosophical.
I like it.
Where did that come from? I got it.
No, I liked it. I feel like I need to listen to it. I was like, yes, I need to change my thoughts.
No, and I've learned a lot about that through the 7 habits of highly successful people and things like that. And it's not all the things that you would imagine them to be. It's not like you have to kill the competition and you have to push yourself on top. And no, a lot of it is collaborative. A lot of it is seriously just taking our thoughts about situations that we are not in our control and making that process in our control. But you've heard a lot from us. So now we're going to take some questions. And hey, Britt, we have this question that just came in. And I saw this pop up earlier, but about time management. And the student asked that now that classes are recorded online, it's taking me a lot longer to get through the videos and take notes. It's actually taking me 30 to 40 minutes over what class time would be normally, like the live in-person class time. And what are your suggestions for managing this?
That's like, I think everyone's like biggest problem right now. So that's kind of when I would personally suggest to do what we said at the beginning of the webinar and spend less time prepping and more time in class. So it's important to read for class, but limit yourself. Say, I'm going to read and I'm going to take some notes. I'm going to do a 1 through though, and then I'm going to attend my class, because your time is going to be better spent in the class itself, pausing and taking notes there, than it is spending hours and hours preparing and reading for the class. So my answer is essentially do the reading. I feel like I'm telling students don't read for class. I'm not telling them that. I am not saying that, but I'm saying do it, read through it once, take your notes, and then devote more time to that in-class lecture with notes, because that's what your professor is emphasizing, they're teaching, and you're going to understand what you read much better. So that's one area where you can cut down time to devote time elsewhere. And then in your schedule, make sure that you're giving yourself, like I said earlier, that buffer. So like just in case, so that way you're not doing things in your calendar. If you have a 1 hour lecture, just give yourself an hour and a half just in case. So you want to do that. But my biggest suggestion for pre-recorded classes is to cut the time you spent prepping and increase the time you spend actually engaged in the class and what you do after the class. So that's my biggest suggestion for that.
Yeah, there are programs that were created online, pre-pandemic. Brittany and I both teach for a Master's of Law program that is already online, and I will have students say to me, they have their synchronous and asynchronous classes, and they'll say, "Oh my God, I take 47 pages of notes prior to," and I always say, "But your professor has taken all of that information that you're supposed to read, and they talk about it in their recorded classes." So I completely agree, and that's sort of a great advantage to be honest, because they're going to point out the most important stuff, and it's not asking you questions and waiting for your classmates to answer, and you're like, I don't know if they're right or wrong, because your professor is actually giving you the information, the correct information, and the important information that he or she is focusing on. Because you might be focusing on X, and then it turns out your professor is focusing on Y in a particular case. And so all that time you spent on X is sort of wasted time. And again, neither Brittany nor I are saying don't read for class. We're not saying that at all. We're simply saying what many successful students have told us, which was, I spent too much time trying to understand this, when the tools for understanding were going to come that day or the next day. Our next question, this is a really good one, is, now that we are online, our professors have assigned us more assignments to keep us engaged. I have to do a lot of quizzes and short answers or other projects for class now. And what's the most effective way to approach these assignments? And I'll add one more thing that I've seen professors doing as well, is worksheets actually in class, that they'll be talking about a case and they have to actually fill in worksheets. So yes, there's a lot of these different things. So, Brittany, what is the most effective way to approach these types of activities and assignments?
Yeah, so I think that I would kind of put them, like, allocate it into your prep time, because I think that a lot of students see these practice problems as busy work, but they're actually helping you prepare for the final, because they're doing it. Yeah. Professors are forcing you to do what we just talked about.
Self-test. Yeah.
Self-test. And so you're allocating self-testing into your schedule. So it's actually just as critical as preparing for class, if not more critical. So I would probably incorporate it, of course you want to do it before it's due, so you get it in on time. But I would incorporate it after you have gotten to review the material and then do the practice assignment. Or in the alternative, if it's an open book thing, which I'm noticing in law school, a lot of them are, just to get engaged with the material, then use it as a time to, after you finished class, so after you left class, try to do it in close proximity when you left the class and what the material is on. So like if you just finished a contracts class on Monday and your next contracts class is on Wednesday and you have like 5 multiple choice questions due between then, try to do it on Tuesday or Wednesday morning before class so that way you had a time to sit with and synthesize the material and do it. But I honestly think that that time that you're doing those assignments kind of go into your synthesizing understanding time. I don't think you should see them as two separate entities. They're actually the same. So it's the work you do after class, that work we're talking that's so important. That's when you should fit those assignments in because it's helping you do that. It's helping you prepare for class.
Yeah. And what I'm also noticing, Brittany, and that's great, is that professors are now actually giving students access to their old exams, or they're already on a database, but actually scheduling time to do one of a few things, which is, hey, these are some practice exams. The greatest thing I've seen professors do is say, if you turn them in, I will give you feedback voluntarily. And I'm like, absolutely do that. That's golden, right? Like the feedback from your professor is golden. So some students have this opportunity to say, our professor said if we turn in, say, 3 practice exams or 2 practice exams before our midterms or our finals, they'll give us feedback. Another thing that professors are doing is giving you practice problems and or old practice exams, and this is of course golden, and then reviewing them in class. So they're really I am finding that these extra steps of giving additional practice problems quizzes is doing students what I feel like we should have always been doing, right? Which is instead of just leaving it completely up to you to figure out how am I supposed to test myself, it sort of is giving you actually what your professor is looking for and in a way to self-test. So I would say that this is an absolute blessing that if your professor is giving you things to engage with the material, to apply the material, is possibly giving you feedback or talking about it in class, I would say that this is a great thing, and should really be like, I feel that something continues post-pandemic or post-online learning that is something that should be implemented from now on, because I think it is really important. And some professors are great at doing it. Okay, I feel like I'm spending too much time preparing for class. I spend hours and hours reading cases before I have to watch a pre-recorded lecture. Is this efficient, and what can I be doing differently? And I think that this is something, and we'll emphasize again here, is yes, no, that is not efficient, because again, the hours and hours you're reading, your time is so valuable in law school. It's so valuable that it's not efficient. Particularly, again, I feel like this is a blessing sort of in disguise when you have that pre-recorded lecture. And so what you can be doing differently, again, is reading that material, giving yourself and this is where sort of everything combines together, giving yourself a time limit, and then seeing how that works. So having that schedule, like Brittany had mentioned about, okay, 2 hours for prep for crim law, as opposed to going down a rabbit hole, because some of us, especially if you're a perfectionist, can go down this rabbit hole and be like, I don't understand what this means, so I'm going to spend all this time. So give yourself a time limit, and that's really where that calendaring comes in. And then say, you know what, after this amount of time, I'm going to go watch the recorded lecture. And then that will highlight everything. Because why spend so much time trying to understand something when most likely all of the enlightenment is going to come in that pre-recorded lecture? Everything to add on that, Brittany?
Yeah, no, I think that I don't think you should, or students should be, especially if the lectures are pre-recorded, I think you should use outside sources to help you facilitate the class prep more, like casebriefs.com or some pre-reading of, just so you can get some context, right?
Absolutely.
And so that it speeds up the process, because the most important part is what happens in class. So you want to like try to set time limits, like Tanya said, so that way you can give you that little buffer too that we were talking about in class if it's going to take you longer, so you can spend more time doing the outside of class stuff, which is the learning, the practicing, and all of that stuff.
Yeah, that's a great point. There are a lot of programs out there that are now very conducive to online learning. And one of the things that Brittany had mentioned with casebreeze.com, and it's not just sort of these case briefs, it's also actually all of these components to help you connect the information that's in your case, whether you're an audio learner or you are a visual learner, or you need to see an outline on the topic, or you want to hear a podcast even on the topic. So that's one example of a place that you can go and say, you know what, I just read Hadley versus Baxendale, and I think it's about this, but I'm not totally sure. Or Hawkins versus McGee. All I got out of it was that there was a hand and it was hairy, and then you can go to these outside sources and be like, okay, let's do a quiz on this topic of not Hawkins versus McGee deals with damages, but it also deals with this concept of offer, and so there are these outside sources that you can use to prepare, which again, those things also highlight the material for you. So there's a lot of things that, I sit here being very nostalgic about. I'm like, gosh, it would have been awesome to have this in law school. Okay. The other question that we have is, I'm not sure if a study group would work for me. How should I go about forming an online study group, and how will I know if it's working for me or not? So this is a fantastic question. Brittany.
Sorry, I was just answering a question in the chat. So I think that it's so tough, right? Because like I want to step back just for a minute, because we're telling everyone to do all of these things. And like, I feel like we're adding to the plate, right? But I don't want to do that. I think that one of the problems with, not problems, but one of the mistakes I think that law students make is that they think that they have to do like everything under the sun. And I just want to say that the advice that Tanya and I are giving today, right, is like, it might go against some of the advice that your professors give, right? Like, because I'm still reflecting on the last question and the fact that I feel like we're telling students not to do the work. And so like, you might have a professor that says, actually preparing for class is the most important part of everything, right? And you need to spend 10 hours preparing for my class, and that's what it is. And then you have us saying, use casebriefs.com and help you, or cut down your prep time because your in-class time is more important. So, and I think that what I'm about to say kind of answers the question that was just asked, in terms of like, you always though have to do what works best for you. And honestly, the first few weeks of law school, we're kind of in the trenches now. Tanya, I don't know what week you're in your law school, but I think I'm in week 6.
Yes, same thing.
So I'm like pretty in there, but like, it's about the middle or a little bit before the middle of the semester where you should kind of know what works and what doesn't. So if anything that I'm saying to do, you already tried and it doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for you and you need to do something else. Or if your professor said to do something and it doesn't work, then you need to do something else. But I think that especially if you have midterms coming up, you want to prep for those midterms and do practice problems before those midterms. And if you didn't do well on your midterm, it signals that something you were doing is not working and you need to change it up. So like, I want to stress, one, although we're giving you tips and things to do, it ultimately has to work for you as an individual. And you always have to adapt your learning as you go through this process. When something doesn't work, you need to change something. So you need to fix the process. And I think that a lot of law students don't do that. They just do what they're told to do, or take the advice and then don't change anything. And the reason they don't change anything is maybe because they didn't know how to or didn't know that they should,
Yeah.
or whatever else. And so I think I just want to say that it's completely okay to do that, because if you want to see a different result on a midterm than a final, it's going to be because you have to change something in order to make that difference. So law school's always adapting and fixing what worked and what didn't. And you're only going to know what worked and what didn't if you decide to engage with the material and do practice problems and self-test. But also, you'll just know for you. And what works for someone in your study group might not work for you. So you also have to take that with what other students say with a grain of salt too, because they're not you. And so that's all. I feel like I got kind of philosophical, but I thought it was important.
It is. And and to go off of what Brittany says, particularly about the questions surrounding study groups, is a couple of things. Is that a study group, similar to how you would study or how you would plan, should be sort of a planned endeavor, right? So everybody is either assigned, say, a practice problem, or assigned to outline a portion of the course, or assigned to do something. So you're not just coming together and just talking, it can be something that, just like you plan everything else, is a planned study session. So you'll know if it's working for you if you leave that and you say, you know what, this collaboration gave me more information. It helped me understand this part of the class. I did my part. I outlined battery. This person outlined assault. This person outlined trespass to chattels. This person outlined false imprisonment. And we came and we all talked about it, and we shared our outlines with each other. And I learned that. You will know that it doesn't work for you if you feel like a couple of things: that your voice is not being heard, that your questions are not being answered, or you feel like that the group has gone off track and it turns out to be really about each of those individual people. Well, this is how I do things, and this is how I do things. And so that is not an effective study group, because a study group is about collaboration and not about a weird competition, or it's also not about just sitting there and expecting to get information from other people. This one is a big one. Managing anxiety during this time has been really difficult, especially since we are not around as many people in online law school. Do you have any tips for managing stress and anxiety? Okay, so we are not immune to stress and anxiety. Myself, Brittany, we've talked about this sort of thing a lot. And there are a lot of different ways to manage it. But I just want to kind of go and say that neither stress nor anxiety should be something that you are, does not mean anything is wrong with you, does not mean that it's not something that you should feel free to talk about, because I think it's super important to talk about. And I will tell you from personal experience, and Brittany can say the same thing, that is, if you don't manage your stress and anxiety, it will manifest in different ways. Okay, it will. And I will tell you without a doubt, your body will not allow you to block that out for very long, or will not allow you to continue that way, because it will start giving you warning signs that there is something wrong. So Brittany, let's talk about any tips that you might have for managing stress and anxiety.
Yeah, I think one of the big ones is, and some tip that I don't follow, but it's probably the most important part, is to, like, you need to take a break, and you need to take breaks, because if you just immerse yourself 100 completely into work, schoolwork, the anxiety, you're quote unquote feeding the monster, right? You're not, like, giving it a break. And so you have to step away from it and also take care of it's all part of taking care of yourself, because if you're not eating well, or you're not eating right, your anxiety will actually worsen. If you're not sleeping, your anxiety will worsen. If you're not or you don't have a stress outlet, so if you're not working out or doing some other thing that really helps with your stress management, drawing, I don't know, watching sports, then your anxiety will then just worsen. So it's about one, taking breaks and stepping away from this so that way you can give yourself a balance, and it's an internal balance that I think is necessary. But it also goes into like really taking care of yourself, because the less you sleep, the less you eat, the less you do that or stuff that you look forward to, the heightened your anxiety will heighten here. I will say too that in law school, something that helped me manage my anxiety was always sticking to a schedule and knowing that like I was going to get stuff done. Anxiety will tremendously increase if you fall behind or if you feel like you spent the whole semester not preparing. Right. And so staying on top of everything and knowing that you did all you could do tremendously helps with this anxiety of law school anyway. So related only to law school. And then I would say, I don't know, I personally like have anxiety, right? And I had to limit my news intake. I had to like kind of control, you can control what comes in, right?
Mhm.
So, I had to control my news intake. I had to um make sure I wasn't constantly looking up COVID stuff or election stuff. Like you just have to like know when to take a break and to take care of yourself. And I like limited my time to like once a week. Like I was gonna look at stuff like once a week to get my like update, and then like that's it.
Right.
And so you really have to you can't control what's happening out there, but you can control what information you expose yourself to and what you get upset about. And then taking care of yourself, I think, will tremendously help with anxiety. My anxiety is so heightened if I like don't sleep or like don't eat well or like don't take breaks. Like that's when I
Right.
notice it. It's like it's like a snowball, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger as the days go on, and I continue to do the same pattern. So that I definitely would think is what students should do.
Absolutely. And dealing with that anxiety and expressing that anxiety is super important, because then there's some people who think that um they're like, I'm just blocking it, I'm just dealing with it, I'm just going to block it out, and it will manifest. And in my own personal experience with anything major, I'm sort of like, yeah, it's fine. I've maybe people around me or either crying or working out or figuring out ways to deal with it, which is, I'm like, wow, they're stressed, I'm not stressed. But then what will happen is I'll break out into like these hives, and I'll be like, I'm not stressed, and the hives will appear, and I'm like, what's happening? And I saw a pattern that every time that I pretended or I convinced myself that this was just not a big deal, these massive hives, to the point where I'm like, okay, I can't ignore this, anymore. This is a problem, and I need to, have an outlet. Another thing, and I know this of course goes all back into scheduling too, is that this is why doing your schedule and then looking back on it is also really important, is that I would schedule like, say, a major thing that I had to be working on. I'm working on these clients, I'm working on these contracts during a time that I have now figured out I am brain dead. Like, there is this time during the day, it's between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m., that no matter what, I am just not productive, And so trying to force myself to do brain heavy work during that time just increased my anxiety. And I hated the fact that I'm like, why can't I just be productive? But I had to face the fact that somehow around 3 p.m., a totally different Tanya just comes in and is like, I can't do anything. And that's fine. Because if I tried to do stuff during that time, it would be just worse. I couldn't, for all of a sudden, a contract I could understand that morning, I can't understand now. And all of a sudden, I'm like, what is wrong? And I'll end up staring at the computer and I'll end up getting more anxious. So also fine, we all have certain times of the day that we know that we're super productive, and maybe certain times of the day we're just like, I can't do this. So listen to your body for that. And I started being like, all right, it's 3 p.m. I can't do anything that involves my brain. Sorry. So I try not to schedule heavy lifting around that time. And it's actually made me more productive to know that those 2 hours during the day, I have to do sort of mindless stuff. Because trying to do stuff when I am not at my best, for example, that time in the afternoon, or for some people, it's when you haven't slept or eaten or exercised, is going to be worse for you. And, you know, Brittany and I are saying this not to talk at you. We're sort of actually talking with you, because we all face these situations. You know, we all want to do well. We all want to succeed. This is why you're in law school. So this is an inevitable part of it. Okay. Oh, this is a fantastic question. So we're going to take one more question. And I think this is a great final question. I'm a 1L, and I just don't know if I'm getting it right. There's no one around to talk to as much like my classmate. And how do I know if I'm getting it? I get it. You know, it's hard, you know, when you're talking to your dog or your plant or your cat or your goldfish, and they're just not giving you answers. You know, you're like, what the heck? So I definitely understand that. Brittany, do you want to chime in here?
Self-testing, right? Self-testing. Self-testing is going to be a huge way where you know that, right? Because you can understand what something says, like you can understand what the definition of an offer is, but you don't know if you actually understand it until you apply it.
Yeah.
So doing that self-testing mechanism is definitely the way, but also you should feel comfortable starting an online study group, right? You can bounce ideas off each other in that way. So other than self-testing, talk to your professor, you know, try to make an office hour or a meeting and say, like, I think I might be getting it, but I'm actually just not sure. Can we like talk about the material a little bit? Don't be afraid to do that at all. I think that self-testing, study groups, and talking to your professors are definitely the best 3 ways to kind of get the answer to that question.
Yeah, and one other thing, and I don't want this to sound negative, but just because you might feel as though you are able to articulate things well in class, and some of you are saying, you know what, I totally get it in class, and you volunteer in class and you can articulate, you can answer your professor's questions, is not the equivalent of self-testing. So that's just another thing, because I also don't want the situation where, again, it's sort of like, well, I understand what's going on in class, I participate, I do well when I'm called on, to somehow be a substitute for self-testing. Because one of the other things that we've learned from our students is this element of surprise that, wait a second, I felt like I was totally getting it when I talked about it, when I spoke it out and things like that. How did I not get this correct on the test? How did I do well? And so that element of surprise where you also feel like you're getting it, right? And again, this is not to sound negative. This does not mean that you're not getting it. It's just a different way of expressing that knowledge when we're in class and we're engaging with our professors than it is on the exam. So that's another thing, that whether you are feeling like, I don't know if I'm getting it right, or whether you feel like, hey, I understand things in class, you've got to self-test. You've got to self-test. Because I have students, I also work with probation students, academic probation students, and they're bright. So my students are fantastic. And they're like, I don't get it. I would raise my hand. I would do this. I was doing well. My professors would be like, you knew this stuff. What happened? You know, on the exam. And it was, you know, I'd say, did you do any practice problems? Like, I didn't think I had to, because I knew it. And so how we learn things in class is oftentimes very different with how we have to do this on the exam, vastly different. So the more things we can do that are more like simulating an exam experience, multiple choice, essay, if you know ahead of time your exam is going to be multiple choice and essay, then you're going to have to self-test doing both of those.
Definitely.
Well, it has been wonderful chatting with all of you about online learning. I think Brittany and I also learned a lot about ourselves and our abilities to think about and be philosophical. And I'm going to go make sure I like do that calendar and implement it. Go work on my thought process. So thank you for that. And as we said, we have other webinars coming up. Always check us out, lawtutors.net. And if you accidentally type in lawtutors.com, that's also fun because it will take you right to lawtutors.net. And so it's always great to register ahead of time because we fill up pretty easily. And when we fill up, then you only have the opportunity to watch the pre-recorded one at the recorded webinar and not to ask questions. And your questions are really valuable to us because these are things that you're thinking about, and they also really help us sort of improve upon and understand things that you're facing in law school so that we can tailor these webinars to you. All right, well, thank you everyone and good luck.
Thank you everyone. Take care.
Bye.